previously several months ago in State versus Miller. We have a number of exhibits also to offer into the record, I believe, when it's time.
And are you ready to call your first witness?
Judge, we are, but before we do that, we have a brief record to make regarding exhibits, if that's okay.
Yes.
We have provided the court and the defense with a list of exhibits. They are State's Exhibit 100 through 134 inclusive. They are, just to summarize them briefly, there are a number of photos that relate to crime scene, a live photo of Noema Graber, several autopsy photos, as well as some Snapchat records and a video, an edited video of an interview that was conducted back in February by Agent Ryan Kedley of the defendant, Jeremy Goodale. We would offer State's Exhibit 100 through 134 at this time.
Has the defendant and the defense had the chance to look at these proposed exhibits?
We have, Your Honor.
So, State's Exhibits 100 through 134 will be admitted. I don't see them on the EDMS system just yet. So, if you're wanting me to view them while you're examining your witness, I would probably need a hard copy, or for those to be filed pretty soon.
Our plan is, our presentation will be similar as it was last time. The exhibits will be displayed on the screen, so you should have access. If you don't, let me know. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Those are admitted.
Our first witness is Agent Trent Valletta.
Agent Valletta, please raise your right hand. Do you promise or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please have a seat whenever the state is ready.
Right. Agent Valletta, can you please state your name for the record?
My first name is Trent, Trent, and my last name is Villeta, V as in Victor, Ilea.
And how are you employed?
I'm a special agent with the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation.
How long have you been a DCI agent?
17 years.
Okay. Any prior law enforcement experience?
Yeah, I was a police officer for about 11 years before that.
Where at?
Most of it was the city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then I did a couple years.
And in the course of your career as a DCI agent, have you worked homicide investigations?
Yes, I have.
Do you know approximately how many?
No. I'm guessing between 5 and 9 death cases a year for 17.
Do you work a certain area of the state?
Originally, yes. Originally, I was assigned to the western third of Iowa, and now I'm in Zone 4, which is basically the southeast part of Iowa.
There are other agents that do what you do in the state, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We have 4 zones. We split the state up basically, I think, by population now, and it's roughly 25.
Back in November of 2021, were you assigned to work the disappearance and the death of Noema Graber?
Yes, I was.
When did that occur?
She was reported missing on October 3rd of 21. We got a call for assistance from the Fairfield Police Department that evening.
On November 3rd?
Yes.
Whenever you first learned of the disappearance of Miss Graber, what did you do?
So the DCI, we are an assist agency. We assist smaller departments that don't work a lot of violent crimes, major felony cases. We will come in and assist them. So we kind of have a procedure when we get called out. First, the request for assistance is made by the department to a supervisor in DCI, who assigns the case to a lead agent, a case agent, which would have been me in this case. And then I will contact the requesting agency and kind of get a brief summary of what's going on my way down to the area.
So when would you have responded here to Fairfield?
I think I got here somewhere between 9:30 and 10 p.m.
And so at this point in time, can you just generally describe for the court what the circumstances were of Noema Graber's disappearance?
Sure. It'd be November 2nd. She was reported missing by her husband, Paul Graber. The Fairfield Police Department it wasn't November 2nd, it was November 3rd. She was last seen alive on November 2nd. The Fairfield Police Department throughout the day of the 3rd conducted a very thorough missing persons investigation, checking pattern of life that sort of thing. So when I originally got the call, they had just located Noema Graber's body in a park.
I'm going to show you what's been previously entered as State's Exhibit 100. This is Sentencing Exhibit 100. Who is this person?
This is Noema Graber. I believe it's her school.
It's a photo that was provided by her family.
Yes.
And what can you tell us then about what you learned concerning the last time Noema Graber was seen and what the circumstances were of her disappearance?
So she had a kind of a pattern of life where at 4 p.m. she would go to a local park and do a walk around the park. It was kind of well known. So Fairfield Police Department was able to determine pretty early that she had left school at 4 p.m. on the 2nd. And then they were able to determine that she actually had entered the park. But when they went to check the park, her vehicle was not there, and they weren't.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Was there any confirmation that she had left the school independent of someone seeing her leave?
Eventually, there was video located of her leaving, and I believe it was shortly before 4 p.m.
All right. So she was known to walk at what park here in Fairfield?
It's Chautauqua Park.
Is that a park here on the edge of town?
Yes, it is.
So when was Noema Graber actually reported missing by any family?
It was the morning of the 3rd.
And who was that would have reported her missing?
Paul Graber, her husband.
So as a result of Noema Graber being missing, Paul Graber reporting her missing, what steps did law enforcement take that ultimately led you?
Sure. Like I said before, the Fairfield Police Department did a very good job of missing persons investigation. They kind of followed her daily activities. They determined at some point during the day that she was probably last at the park. They don't have her leaving the park. So they started a search of the park. That is how they...
And Chautauqua Park is a fairly large area, is that correct?
It is. It's got a long walking path, but it's pretty wooded. It's just scenic.
And as a result of that search of the park, was Noema Graber ultimately found?
Yeah, she was located kind of deep in the woods off the walking.
I'm going to show you an overview of the park, State's Exhibit 101. You see that?
Yes.
What does this exhibit generally show us?
Okay, so the orange or red little marker that says Chautauqua Park, that's kind of the center of the park. The line around that's the actual walking path. And then when you go to the upward center of the screen where it says body location, that is where she was found. That's right by a railroad bridge going over a stream.
And I know the topography of this map does not really come through on the satellite photo that we have here, but how would you generally describe that area where Noema Graber was ultimately found?
So when you see the arrow that says access to railroad tracks, it's like a maintenance or truck path that would take you back to the tracks. It's not a well-kept path. It's basically grass. But you can actually exit off the trail into that grass, and then you have to walk back quite a ways along the tracks themselves to actually get to where Noema Graber was located. But again, she was in the woods, kind of at the bottom of a deep slope, so there was not easy access to her.
Let's look at the next photo, Exhibit 102. Eventually here, in this case, were two suspects developed in her death?
Yes, it would be Willard Miller and then Jeremy Good.
All right, and what does State's Exhibit 102 show us with regard to where they lived here in Fairfield?
Yeah, it's representing the location of the residences and kind of the distance between the residences and Chautauqua.
And generally speaking, what is the distance from the Miller residence to the location of Noema Graber's body in Chautauqua?
Yeah, I think we kind of agreed that was roughly a mile, so it'd be easy walking distance to the park.
And would Jeremy Goodale's residence be similarly located?
Yeah, it would have been just a little bit, but roughly a mile.
Okay, and this map here shows those locations in relation to Chautauqua Park, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
After finding Noema Graber's body, did law enforcement have any suspects?
Yes, they did. The way the body was discovered, it was obviously a suspicious death. She had been concealed, which was something that she couldn't have done herself. And Fairfield Police Department is just one of those police departments that has a good kind of a feel for the community, and they had pretty quickly developed a few students who had made threats towards Mrs. Graber.
And did that include Jeremy Goodale and or Willard Miller?
The one that they had at the top of their whiteboard was Willard Miller talking about making Mrs. Graber disappear.
So what, after Noema Graber was located, what were your next steps in the investigation?
Okay, so she was underneath a tarp with a wheelbarrow on the top of her and then a railroad tie on top of that. Part of my responsibilities as a case agent is to determine what resources are needed as far as evidence collection, that sort of thing. Just from myself going out there along with a couple other people, we could tell pretty quickly we'd need our lab response to help with evidence collection. And then, of course, I had other agents coming down. Really, the first hour or so was pretty fluid as far as the investigation goes, where we just have to develop leads and assign the leads, figure out how to manage the crime scene. Usually the first hour is pretty busy.
So on the first evening that you were involved in the investigation, did any witnesses come forward that provided any identity as to who may have been responsible for Noema Graber's death?
Yeah, so when I had arrived, Fairfield Police Department had a whiteboard, and they had several names. Like you said, Willard Miller was at the top, making a threat towards Mrs. Graber. What we had discovered was another student named John Burnett had showed up prior to us getting there, claiming to have information as to her disappearance. We called him pretty quickly back, and when he came back in, he said that he had information that would show who killed Mrs. Graber.
Before we get into John Burnett's information, at this point in the investigation, at the time that he showed up at the law enforcement center, had the vehicle that Noema Graber drove, had that been found?
No.
So did you then speak to John Burnett?
Yeah, so I assigned two of the agents that were there, Ryan Kedley and Richard Vale. We were basically, like as I said, trying to get our feet on the ground, but he appeared to be a good first start, so they started talking with him. He had come into the police department with his girlfriend Kaylee, so we didn't know if we'd have to interview them separately or not, but that's kind of how it started with John Burnett.
And what exactly was it that John Burnett provided to you and other investigators that assisted the investigation?
Yeah, he brought in screenshots of Snapchat which were from Jeremy Goodale, and they were very descriptive and basically describing the murder of Mrs. Graber that Goodale and Miller had committed.
And did these were screenshots of text messages he had provided you, or screenshots of Snapchats?
Yeah, and forgive me, I'm not a good social media descriptor, but it's my understanding with Snapchat that once you open the Snapchat that is sent to you, it'll disappear off your phone. So the only way to actually save the Snapchat is by screenshotting it or taking a picture of your phone, because as soon as you leave it, it'll beep. So he had received a couple, John Burnett had received a couple of disturbing Snapchats prior that he didn't save. When he realized that these were important, he started saving the actual Snapchats provided to law enforcement.
And we will talk about this a little bit later, but ultimately were some of those Snapchats captured and able to have been saved by law enforcement? Yes,
both through search warrant and then by actually taking pictures of John Burnett's.
Is it accurate to say that John Burnett, the information that he provided, helped break this investigation and helped to solve Noema Graber's murder?
I would say that's almost an understatement. It was pretty much everything to the investigation, and it was relative.
At some point after John Burnett's interview, were you able to determine the location of Noema Graber's van?
Yes, he had said that in a conversation, it was either by phone or a previous Snapchat that he didn't save, that Goodale had told him that Mrs. Graber's van was at the end of a dead-end road. Again, the Fairfield Police Department, knowing the community as well as they did, had a good idea what road that was. Middle Glasgow Road. It was just a road that the kids would go to hang out. So Lieutenant Kinsella drove out there and located the van in a few minutes.
Okay, I want to show you an overall exhibit here, 103. What does this exhibit show us?
Okay, so it's kind of a zoomed out picture of the east end of Fairfield. The arrows show basically where the vehicle is located. That it's just a long dead end road, Middle Glasgow. Her vehicle would have been then kind of off the road, driven into kind of a patch of trees, somewhat concealed, but the police were located.
Okay, I'm going to skip ahead to 106 if I could. Back it up. Sorry, 105. What does State's Exhibit 105 show us in relation to the van?
Yeah, so that would be the basically the path that you would have to drive off the road to hide the van. If you look up in the top left corner, it's kind of hard to see because it's dark, but you can see the rear tail lights of the van and license kind of hidden.
And then we have State's Exhibit 106, which this is a closer view of the van, correct?
That's correct.
And that is Noema Graber's van, is that right?
Yes.
I assume the van was searched, is that correct?
Yes, it was.
Now, in relation to the van and the location that we've just looked at here on the map and a little bit closer here in 105 and 106, was there any other video, surveillance video, or anything of that nature that was located that would have helped determine who was involved and where the van would have, how it would have been used? Yeah,
there was lots of video involved with this case. Regarding the van winding up at its location in particular, the last house, I think it was Ryan Ford's house, had a camera that basically shows the van going past, and then later on to what we described as male subjects. We couldn't really see who they were because it was from a distance, walking away from that location. But he's roughly, 300-400 yards away from where the van would have been located. He would have been the first house that if someone was leaving that area that those people would have went by.
Okay, and you were able to confirm that through a witness as well, is that correct?
Yes, they had a friend, and I have a hard time saying his last name. His first name is Sane, and he was actually not involved in the case, but was called by Goodale to be picked up out on Glasgow Road. And so the video will actually show the boys that were walking down the road and the vehicle.
Was that individual, was his name Habib Sane?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And he would have been the one that would have gone out to pick them up on the road after they would have left the van in this location that we see here in State's Exhibit 106.
Yeah, that's correct. And that would have been, I think, shortly before 5 p.m.
This would have been on what date?
On the 3rd.
All right. Ultimately, Agent Villada, were search warrants conducted of both Willard Miller's home and Jeremy Goodale's home?
Yes, they were.
When would those have been executed?
They were later in the day. There was quite a bit going on that night. I think it was roughly 6 a.m. Would have been on the 4th that the search warrants would have been at the residences. And
at this time, did you have some idea as to what the cause of Noema Graber's death was?
The one thing you kind of learn pretty quickly when you examine bodies is types of injuries kind of become readily apparent, certainly like bullet holes, stab wounds, that sort of thing. When I first looked at Noema Graber's body, I didn't really observe any other injuries except to what appeared to be to some sort of like massive injury to her head. Generally, from my observations, that would be like blunt force trauma to the head. You can never really tell what by what, but blunt force trauma. So We had an idea that it was a homicide, and it was probably through some sort of object hitting her very hard.
Okay, so whenever you say blunt force trauma, would you have been looking for objects that could have caused that type of injury?
Yes.
Would that have included a baseball bat?
Yes.
And did you find a baseball bat at either one of the residences of Miller or Goodale?
We had, and I think it came through John Burnett again, that baseball bat that's showed here in Exhibit 104 with like flames on it was the object used in force trauma.
And this exhibit that we have up here that shows the bat, where is that location?
That would be in Willard Miller's room.
All right, so let's go back to the park if we could. So did you and other officers thoroughly search the park along with your crime scene team?
Yes, we did.
And were other things found that would have been related to Noema Graber's death?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to walk through a number of photos here. The first one here is State's Exhibit 107. What do we see here in 107?
So that's the path, and as you see kind of at the bottom of the roadway there, that's a law enforcement vehicle. This would be kind of looking down towards the entrance to the railroad tracks, that maintenance road.
This would have been accessible to anyone that would have been entering the park, is that correct?
That's correct.
State's Exhibit 108. Well, let's go back to 107, one more question. Is that a trail that leads down to the area that we're getting ready to look at here in Exhibit 108?
Yes.
Okay, so 108 is now on the screen. What does Exhibit 108 show us?
Okay, yeah. So with the previous picture, you would be looking down towards this area where you see the crime scene tape. That's the actual entrance into where the railroad tracks are located. And basically in the middle right-hand side of the picture, that's kind of where we first start seeing blood evidence.
Okay, and what can you be further descriptive of that? What did you exactly see?
It kind of, again, you don't want to make huge assumptions, but it really looked like there was a major event there because there's a large amount of blood.
Where would that have been specifically in this photo?
Yeah, it's kind of the right center of the photo. If you go all the way to the right and up to the middle. Yeah.
That's fine. No, that works. And the yellow tape that we see, where does that take us if we go beyond that?
So, yeah, once you walk past underneath the tape, you're walking towards a railroad track.
State's Exhibit 109, is this the area just a bit more to the right of the previous photo?
Yeah, yes, this is what I was trying to describe as if you would have kept going to the right, you're kind of looking right at where probably the assault happened. Large amounts of blood still on the leaves and grass, kind of in the center.
Exhibit 110, is that just the opposite of 109?
Yes, so you'll be standing at basically the crime scene tape.
Then 111?
That would be just continuing down the path, looking back to a path or tracks.
112.
So this would be then, again, just moving further back. You're still looking at crime scene tape. This would give you a better, though, representation of how wide the area was that we're kind of talking about.
So in these exhibits that we've looked at, 108 through 112, I know we're going to play a portion of Jeremy Goodale's interview later in our presentation, but in relation to that interview, does this area generally match up with what he tells officers later as to where Noema Graber was first attacked?
Yes, it does.
And going back to Exhibit 110, this area, there appears to be going back uphill, is that right?
Yes.
So you're standing at the bottom of a hill near that entrance to where we see the crime scene tape. Would that be true?
Yes.
Are you visible to anyone else in the park? If anyone else would have been in the park, would you have been visible to them?
You would have had to be relatively close to see that.
And this that we're looking at, this path, is it a paved path, is that right?
Yes, it is.
And it's a walking path, is that right? So it's not made for vehicles?
Yes, it's only for law enforcement.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But people can't just drive there normally.
Correct.
Let's go back to, go to Exhibit 113. So this is what I would describe as the pathway or entrance into the railway tracks area. Would that be true?
Yes.
Is that gray berm that we see in the distance there, is that where the railroad tracks are located?
Yes, the gray is actually the gravel.
And is this a path that you could drive a vehicle back into if you wanted to do that?
Yes.
Is there? I know you have crime scene tape up. That obviously wasn't there before. Is there any other restriction to getting back in that area? Is there a gate or a fence or anything that blocks your way?
No, and you could really access it from the woods as well.
In relation to this particular location, where would Noema Graber have located?
So as you're looking at the crime scene tape, she would be off to the right, roughly 150.
Fairly well concealed. Is that accurate?
Very well concealed.
Okay, so let's go to the next photo, Exhibit 114. What does this show us?
So now we're on the other side of the crime scene tape, and we will gives you a better representation of kind of the path that would eventually lead us toward Noema Graber's body. You get a better view of the tracks, the path.
Exhibit 115.
Again, now we're on the other side, looking back towards the crime scene tape.
This is basically just the opposite direction, 14.
That's correct.
And then 116.
So now we're kind of, again, we're on the other side of the crime scene tape, and now we're looking down the railroad tracks towards where the bridge is and where...
The railroad tracks to the left, is that right?
That's right.
And 117, that's the opposite of 116.
Yes.
All right, now in this area that we see in this series of photos that we've just looked at, was any blood located that would have belonged to Noema Graber?
Yes, the lab team was able to recover a few samples in the ground.
Okay, 118 shows us what?
Now we're on top the railroad tracks. You can see the bridge, and we're getting relatively close to where her body was.
The bridge you can see is the darker area on the railroad tracks up there to in the left corner.
That's correct.
Is this terrain rocky?
It's very rocky.
All right, is it hard to walk on just normally?
Yes.
States Exhibit 119, what does that show us?
So now we're on the railroad tracks themselves. We'll be looking down towards the location where Noema Graber's body was.
And remind us again how you first were able to get to this location. How did you know to come?
During the search of the park, the police were able to, they basically did a grid search. What kind of stood out to them was they saw a red object in the woods, later turned out to be a wheelbarrow. Once they got close to the wheelbarrow, they could see essentially a shoe, looked like a foot in a shoe.
And this area, you just found Noema Graber's body in this area because of the grid search, is that correct?
That's correct.
Not because of anything Jeremy Goodale or Willard Miller informed you of, is that right?
That's right.
All right. So Exhibit 119, is this a steep embankment if we go down this area to the trees?
It's very steep, and then the gravel is, excuse me, also very loose. It's just thick woods. It's not an area that people...
And can you see at least a portion of the red wheelbarrow here in 119?
I think you can. I think the next picture would be a little better for that, but I think that's what that was supposed to represent. You can start to see some of the scene.
It's in the center of the photo, is that right?
That's right.
Exhibit 120 is
Yes.
a closer view of that area, is that right?
That's correct. And you see the wheelbarrow with the railroad tie on top of it.
Okay. The dark object, I'm sorry, that's across the red, what it ends up being a wheelbarrow is what?
It's a railroad tie, so it's pretty heavy. This probably would have been laying by.
So was this the area then that you found Noema Graber's body?
Yes.
Exhibit 121, what does that show us?
Okay, so again, a much better representation. So we actually moved down off the railroad tracks past the wheelbarrow, and now you're looking up towards the railroad tracks. And this just kind of represents on how the attempt was made to conceal her with. Now you see the tarp, you see the wheelbarrow, and the...
Okay, so the tie, the tarp, and the wheelbarrow are all covering or concealing Noema Graber's body?
That's correct.
And did you ever approach this area and then start to uncover these items?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so States Exhibit 122, what does that show us?
Again, that's just a close-up of the tarp, the wheelbarrow, which you can see is broken, and then the railroad ties above.
And is Noema Graber ultimately found wrapped under this tarp?
She is. If you examine the picture closely, you can see the shoe.
Is that to the left?
Yes.
At least the bottom of the shoe is what it looks like to me.
Yes.
And 123?
So 123 is now we've removed the wheelbarrow from Noema Graber, that this is how she was wrapped.
Is this with the wheelbarrow taken off of her? Is that right?
Yes.
And the railroad tie has been moved somewhat. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Before we show the next couple of pictures, these are actual body photos of Noema Graber. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And we'll show you Exhibit 124. Does that show us?
So this is when you remove the tarp. This is basically how she was discovered, how she was represented when we first.
And the blue material that's at her feet, what is that?
Those are her pants.
And she still has a bra on, is that correct?
Yes.
State's Exhibit 125 is a closer picture, is that correct?
Yes.
And then was her more items removed where you could see the blunt force injury, at least grossly see it at the scene?
Yes.
We'll show you Exhibit 126. And what are we seeing here?
Again, so this is just based on experience. My initial suspicion as to looking at this picture would be some sort of object had hit Noema Graber in the back of the head, which would cause that injury.
We'll leave the photos here for just a second. Noema Graber's body was autopsied, is that right?
Yes, she was.
Okay, and who did that?
Michelle Catalier.
And who was that person?
She's a pathologist that works for the Iowa Medical Examiner's Office in Ankeny.
So during the investigation, after locating Noema Graber, making some determination that Willard Miller and Jeremy Goodale may have been involved in her death, during this investigation, were you ever able to develop any type of motive for why either one of these men, Miller or Goodale, would have wanted to harm her? Yes,
the Snapchats that John Burnett provided us from Jeremy Goodale were pretty definitive. That he basically says Mrs. Graber failed the wrong students. So it became pretty apparent that the murder was due to grading issues.
And the grading issues related directly to which?
It related to Chaden Miller, Willard Miller, who had just had a meeting, I believe, that day with his mom and Noema Graber regarding him failing her class.
Were you ever able to make any determination as to whether or not Goodale had her as a...
Yes, and I believe that he did pretty well in the class. I don't think that he had definitely the issues that Willard Miller and Mrs. Graber.
Concerning Jeremy Goodale's involvement with Noema Graber's death, were you able to determine how the two of them connected?
Yes, so about 2 weeks or so before the actual murder itself, Willard Miller had approached Jeremy Goodale and basically asked him if he would be willing to help him kill Noema Graber.
And Jeremy Goodale later confirmed that, is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you remember how long before Noema Graber's death that initial conversation?
Yes, it was roughly 2 weeks.
Concerning Jeremy Goodale's connection to Noema Graber's death, was a search done of his phone and Snapchat records?
Yes.
And were you able to find any information that connected him directly to the death of...
Yes, and the Snapchat records themselves would have confirmed what John Burnett provided.
Just by comparison, while we're getting this on the screen, did you have any similar type information from Willard Miller's cell phone?
From Willard Miller's cell phone, we were able... There wasn't, I guess, Snapchats, but there was information on there that would implicate him in the...
But not Snapchat records, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, State's Exhibit 127 is here on this. What does this exhibit show us?
Yeah, so this is what John Burnett provided us, one of the Snapchats that he had captured. This is from Jeremy Goodale, and it's Clorox, and basically the caption says, "Time to hide a body."
This came directly from Jeremy Goodale's Snapchat account, is that right?
Yeah, directly from Jeremy Goodale to John Burnett.
This was from John Burnett?
I believe he provided this to him.
All right, State's Exhibit 128, what does this show us?
So this, again, is from Jeremy Goodale to John Burnett, and this is just a picture of Goodale with a mask on with a hood, and it just says, point of view, or POV, you're my Spanish teacher, and this is the last thing you see.
The way that he is dressed with a hoodie and a mask, and what also looks like possibly a stocking cap. Is that right?
Yes.
To obscure his face. Is that correct?
Yes.
Later in his interview to police, confirmed that he.
Yes.
And specifically, do you remember him saying that he had lowered his mask right before Noema Graber?
That sounds correct. Yes, I believe he said that.
And we'll get into that detail later, but that would match up to what that we see here, Snapchat image on.
That's correct.
And 129.
Okay, so 129 is again, it would be a Snapchat picture of a green tarp. You see like a rope in there, and it's someone holding on to a shovel.
And the caption here?
It says, "No, I'm actually ready. Here we go."
Again, this came from Jeremy Goodale's Snapchat. Is that right?
That's correct.
And then I think our last one here is Exhibit 130. What is this thing?
So this would be the wheelbarrow that was eventually found on top of Noema Graber. You see a shovel that was used to try to dig into the ground, but the ground was frozen, was really hard. And then there's a lantern, and inside the green bag there's some other things that may have been used to try to conceal her.
Jeremy Goodale was brought in for questioning. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
All right. And while he was at the police station, was there a conversation that was recorded between him and a family?
Yes.
Who was that?
It was his sister. I'm not sure of her name, but I believe it was his older.
All right. And were you able to listen to their interaction?
Yes, we were.
What was it that Jeremy Goodale said directly as it relates to?
Yes, the conversation is they basically acknowledged they knew they were being recorded, so they were trying to talk soft, but still we were able to hear them. She had asked him why he had done this, asked if it was something to do with video games. He kind of basically just tells her, he goes, "I have no remorse that I did this, and I don't regret doing this." Really denies any video game influence.
And this would have been what date?
That would have been essentially, it would have been early morning on the
November.
Yes.
2021. During your investigation, were you able to determine if there was any evidence of planning the murder of Noema Graber by both Willard and?
Yes, it seemed to be quite a bit of planning, actually.
Can you summarize that for us?
Willard Miller had created basically a murder list of items to get to commit the murder. Both Goodale and Miller had conducted surveillance on Noema Graber to try to determine her pattern of life, to know where she was. And they seemed the night of the murder to have all their supplies ready to go.